what's going on in the bond market and why it matters. Yesterday, there was an auction for the US 20-year bond market, and it was weak. There was weak demand out there. Now, what happens is when investors are concerned about the path of inflation, and that's particularly what's going on at the moment in the bond market. You see around the world, you see yields are pushing up. And what investors are concerned about is that inflation is still pretty resilient. We've seen Canadian CPI out earlier this week showing that inflation is stickier, it's firmer than markets are expecting. And that means that investors are just concerned that interest rates, if they're going to be cut, with a number of central banks moving towards cutting interest rates, and there's sort of fiscal stimulus coming up, particularly like out of the US, but at the same time, inflation is still problematic. It just means that central banks are storing up the problem for later on, and it's going to be a worse problem than it currently is now. And that's why yields are moving up because they're anticipating that the market will have to end up, hiking interest rates even further in the future. And they seem to be ignoring that narrative. And if you look at the 30-year yield here in the US, look at the way it's reaching so much higher. And you can see what's happening is further out down the yield curve, we're seeing the yield curve rise. And if central banks don't sort of slow down that path of interest rate cutting, what it's saying is that there's an inflationary force that's coming. Traders don't like it, so they're not prepared to buy bonds at the present yield, hence that weak demand for the 20-year US Treasury. And there's also a wider concern about the general US debt issue with Moody's downgrading their credit rating for the US from AAA to AA1 in the middle of May as well. That doesn't help things. So this bond market reaction, you can see, you can see it across the world, yields sort of generally moving up, and you can see that high inflation print for Canada, Canadian 10-year bond yields surging high. You can see inflation is problematic in Japan, that continues to move higher. You can see the US 10-year bond yields continue to move higher. Now that matters, and that's what's going to be weighing on investors' minds, and it's a concern.